Thank you. We are now reconvening our open session for the regular Board of Education meeting for Thursday, November 8th, 2018. We will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will ask Laura Lagacki to please lead us in the pledge. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, we will now proceed with roll call. Sarah Kirby-Gonzalez. Here. Kobe Pizzotti. Here. Jackie Wong. Here. Annabella Willis.
Here.
And I am also present. Thank you. So we will now go to the announcement of actions taken in closed session. E1, Government Code Section 54957, Conference with Legal Counsel, Public Employees Discipline, Dismissal Release. Information was received and direction was given. E2, Government Code 54956.9, D2, Conference with Legal Counsel, pending a potential litigation. The board discussed in closed session. We will now move to approval of the agenda, and I will be pulling M5. Are there any other changes? Okay, may I get a motion to approve?
I'll approve the agenda with M5 move to, are you moving that to action?
Yes, it will be
Okay.
to action.
Move to action.
Thank you. All right, a second, please.
I second.
Seconded by Jackie Wong, a motion originally made by Sarah Kirby-Gonzalez. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimously approved. Thank you. We'll now move on to communications and celebrations. J1, school report, Riverbank Elementary School. Hortensia Hernandez, principal.
I'm setting my timer. Good evening. Good evening, President Alcala and Board of Trustees, Superintendent Luna, and Cabinet members, and all of our invited guests this evening. It's an honor to be here this evening to share with you some of the wonderful things that are happening at Riverbank Elementary this year. This year, Riverbank has chosen to focus on LCAP goal number 2, as we are honing in on aligning our instructional focus with those goals of Washington Unified, along with our strategic plan. In planning this year, I felt that we needed to be very targeted in what direction we were heading. So this year, we looked at establishing a culture of professional learning teams, leading through the lens of equity, as well as MTSS in supporting the learning of the whole child. This year, Riverbank added 10 new staff members to our site, and I thought it was imperative to not only build on the relationships we had established on our site, but to also include our new staff members into establishing our professional learning teams to establish our learning communities. Many may know that this is something I am firmly very strong in being change agents. And I believe that in order for us to help people move forward, we need to build relationships to understand where their journey begins and not just focus on where we want them to be. And that requires us to build capacity. At the onset of this school year, I teamed up with the principal, Ms. Stacy Faulkner from Westmore Oaks, and in order to build a capacity and build a community of teachers who would meet the needs of our students, we needed to look deeply at ourselves first and deal with our own implicit biases before we can support and teach students. And we worked with Nicole Anderson, and our leadership teams came out, and we really started to dig deeper into the work. Earlier this year, we had the opportunity, and thank you, Superintendent Luna, for taking us to go and listen to Dr. Tyrone C. Howard, professor at UCLA, who talks about building the supports, not just for students, but for staff. Because how are we supposed to support our students where they are if we are not supporting our teams? To really build a deep awareness of trauma and trauma-informed practices to address the realities that our students come to us every day with. In establishing our goals, we really had to be specific in our timelines to focus our priorities. At Riverbank, we want to foster a culture which completely centers around the diverse needs, and we know we have many at Riverbank, of our students, to address the needs of every single learner where they are. This timeline is just a visual to give you an idea that we established professional learning teams this year, starting to look at MTSS through a different lens, looking at supports that students and staff may need, especially with the high number of new staff on our campus, looking at time and being intentional with it, being reflective, and being able to measure student progress to see student achievement as our end goal. MTSS is something that I am passionate about because we deal with teaching students where they are and looking at the gaps that they may have, be they academic or social-emotional. And something we're looking at is really looking at data this year, having common assessment, something we have not had in Washington Unified, to look at students to help teachers drive instruction, looking at differentiated instruction, looking at social-emotional needs. We are very fortunate to have an outreach specialist 5 days out of the week this year, and I'm thankful for that, and our social worker. And our end goal is success for students, every student. And when we talk about students, we talk about all of our children being successful. At Riverbank, we have a little over 810 students this year. 43% of our population are second language learners that speak almost over 14 languages on our campus. Looking at our Tier 3 supports, our first round of meetings, we identified almost 30% of our students requiring academic or social-emotional Tier 3 supports. And 100% of our team is hands-in for professional learning to support our students and to support one another. Our mission is clearly aligned with that of Washington Unified, that we are the gateway to extraordinary possibilities, where we challenge not only our students, but one another to support the students to become successful lifelong learners. And this quote resonated with me when I heard Tyrone say it, and I live it, and I have it in my office, that to teach and build a community of equity, it means to be boldly unapologetic about serving our most vulnerable students. And as we know, the definition of equity, according to Jeff Andrade Duncan, is to give students what they need when they need it. And I wanted to be brief with my time because I do have invited guests here this evening. Mm-hmm. And in reflection and looking at adding preschool this year, I didn't think the preschoolers could come and sing for us because it's probably their bedtime. But I reflect back on seeing that we have kindergartners on my campus, and they are where it all begins. And I know my parents are very supportive and so excited to have them here. So I'm going to have Miss Mendez's class. If you can, please come on up. And they have performed. They're going to prepare 2 songs for us today.
Oh, fantastic.
Come on up.
Should we go down? Oh, you want to? Okay.
5 little pumpkins sitting on the gate. The first one said, oh my, it's getting late. The second one said, there are bats in the air. The third one said, but we don't care. The fourth one said, let's run, run, run. And the fifth one said, we're ready for some fun. Then, went the wind and went the lights and the 5 little pumpkins rolling out of sight.
We'd love to take a picture with the children. Would that be okay?
All right, everyone face me this direction. Everyone see me? All right, on 3, everyone smile. 1, 2, 3. Hold it. Perfect. Thank you.
Wait till folks clear a bit. Ah, that's always a good sign. Yeah. Yeah, they're very important people to them. We just We're never deserving. We are very lucky.
Okay, very good, thank you. So we are now moving on to our student and association reports. We will begin with Student Board Member Annabella Willis from Yolo High School.
Hello, good morning, everyone. I am the Student Board Representative from YOLO. The first update will be from Westfield. On Wednesday, 31st, Westfield had their annual Best Costume event where students wore their costumes to school, and for the students that qualified, they got to trick-or-treat around campus. The preschool classes also participated. On November 3rd, Project Church came to Westfield and repainted the playground to create a fresh new look. Their great work was appreciated by all.
Oh,
Bridgeway Elementary. Bridgeway wants to thank all their parents and guardians who attended student-led conferences the week of October 22nd. Bridgeway would like to congratulate the 6th through 8th grade teams who made it to the semifinals, and the 6th through 8th grade flag football team who went into the playoffs as the first seed. National Junior Honor Society finished trick-or-treat for the UNICEF on October 31st. Leadership started the annual Teddy Bear Drive on November 5th. Bridgeway would also like to thank all families that supported the cookie dough fundraiser. Principal Chin held this year's first Principal's Cafe on Friday, November 2nd, and discussed equity and MTSS. Elkhorn Elementary. On October 25th, students at Elkhorn had a great opportunity to learn to plan, pack, and protect as part of California Food Rep Week. Students got to visit with many local officials and engaged in hands-on activities to help them be prepared in the events of an emergency. Westmore Oaks Elementary. The Rotary Club of West Sacramento held a check presentation for Rotary of West Sacramento President Scott. The funds are being used for the project-based learning elective students to make stand-alone solar chargers to send to energy-poor schools in Kenya. Riverbank Elementary. Our Lady Otters have won the volleyball championships third year in a row. Sixth graders are at Sly Park Science Camp learning all week. Riverbank's multicultural potluck is on the 5th from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Stonegate Elementary. Stonegate staff recorded kinders and first grade VAPA performance. There was the videos, but you guys already seen them perform. Yeah. Stonegate. Stonegate Elementary.
Oh, Southport.
Southport, sorry. Southport Elementary held the 11th annual World Peace Rose Garden Poetry ceremony last Friday. Over 100 family members, community members, and all of the Southport students and staff celebrated the 10 winning students. You were all invited to come to the Southport Rose Garden and see the winning poems now on display. Members of the West Sacramento Project Church volunteered along with members of OMT to touch up and repaint the lines on the blacktops last week. The basketball courts, foursquare, tetherball, and more were all given much needed attention. Southport would like to thank Project Church and MOT. Washington Middle College High School. Halloween event was held on the 29th of October and was a huge success, with kids of all ages visiting for crafts and trick-or-treating. Wendy Lee from Sacramento City College has been visiting to help students select a college course for the spring. Just an FYI, students will be in session the Monday to Wednesday of Thanksgiving break due to the college schedule. River City High School. River City just hosted their Powder Puff Rally and Game. Leadership is now working on blood drive that River City will be hosting on November 16th from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Feel free to come on campus to donate and save a life. YOLO Education Center. YOLO's handball tournament began on November 5th, 2018. YOLO is planning a staff potluck on November 9th, 2018. YOLO held their second college registration workshop on November 6th, 2018. We're having our third huddle of the year on November 15th, where students will be presented with certificates to recognize those who have shown improvement in one or more of the following areas: academics, attendance, and behavior. Parents and guardians are invited to attend YOLO's informational meetings on the last Thursday of every month at 8:30 a.m. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. That was great, Annabella. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. Okay, we are now moving on to WSTA reports. Don Stauffer. Thank you.
Good evening. Once again, I have to follow an adorable group of kindergartners. And so sorry that I can't be as entertaining and as heartwarming as that group. And anyway, I'd like to offer congratulations to our trustees, Norma Alcala and Sarah Kirby-Gonzalez, in their re-election. And I'd also like to offer congratulations to Preston Jackson on his victory this week. So I'm sure he is anxiously awaiting that fifth seat over here on the stage. Have to say right now, the mood and certificated is probably a little on the anxious side, and a lot of that has to do with potential facilities changes that are upcoming. I know I've had lots of calls and emails about those this week. So I'm hoping that the process can be as transparent and as inclusive as possible. And I'm looking forward to the presentation later on in this meeting for more information on how this is going to proceed. And with that, thank you.
We are now moving on to the CSEA report. Thank you.
Good evening, Cabinet. Good evening, Board, or Board Cabinet. CSEA would like to congratulate everybody who ran, and we'd also like to congratulate those who won. And we are excited with working with you guys. CSEA is also, not to reflect on, but also very, very concerned about the facilities and whatnot. But more or less, there are lots and lots of concerns coming in, lots of calls about potential layoffs with facilities. So it's already gotten back around to me that classified was up on the block. So I'm looking very forward to having conversations with Chris and making sure that that's not the case. Also, on a lighter note, Daniel's excited about working with special ed on sending paraeducators to the conference that's coming up. Very exciting times. So with that, I believe that's all.
Thank you. Thank you. We are now moving on to public comments. At this time, members of the public may address the board on topics that are under the jurisdiction of the board and are not on the agenda, although the board, by law, may not take action at this meeting. The board may limit the total time for public input on any topic to 20 minutes unless it chooses to waive the item limit for a particular item. Individual speakers may be limited to 3 minutes to comment on any topic. Public comments consisting of individual charges, complaints, or derogatory remarks about any district employee are requested to be submitted in writing to the administration in accordance with the district's complaint procedure. We do recognize that a lot of people commenting before the board and the audience and the people watching at home on television is a nerve-wracking experience. So to try to make that as easy as possible, we do ask that there not be any applause or booing or catcalling or other demonstrations to maintain a civil discourse here in the chambers. The board respects the rights of members of the public to speak to us regarding matters on the agenda and other matters within the jurisdiction of the board. However, it is important for members of the public to recognize that comments regarding students other than the speaker's own children made during the public board meeting may be legally actionable as a violation of students' privacy. Both state and federal law prohibit the board and others from discussing confidential student information in open session. To this end, be advised that if you reference a student's name other than your own student, you will be out of order and your comments may not be protected by the privileges that protect public speech. You could be found liable for such comments in legal proceedings. Furthermore, it is important for the public to understand that negative or derogatory comments made against district employees or others, even those made in a public board meeting, may be actionable civil defamation. As such, the board reminds the public that the district has existing board policy that allows the public to lodge a complaint against a district employee. This policy provides a comprehensive procedure for reviewing and responding to public complaints. This process provides a more thorough opportunity to be heard than is allowed under the open meeting law that governs this meeting. We will now move on to the consent agenda. We have M5 that has been moved over to action items. May I get a motion to approve?
I move.
May I get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimously approved. We will now go on to our public hearing. At this time, we will open the public hearing for input regarding State Board of Education waiver. And we have one.
No, we have 4.
We have 4? Okay, thank you. Okay, we have 4 public comments. Begin with Mr. Scott Rafferty.
Just to summarize some of the points that I made before your closed session, we have been, the plaintiff in this case has been very accommodating, has granted extensions, has tried to make this work for the community, and I respect in the case of Member Pizzotti that he thinks it should be put off until after the census on grounds of cost. But this is not a way to accomplish that, because this will cost much, much more to go to court, and that will happen. So I think that's just an overpowering reason that we should not be spending money in court. We should be spending it on better teachers, on retaining the great teachers we have, on improving our facilities, and providing more enrichment to our students. But also, this provision of the law has been abolished for every other kind of jurisdiction, and it has been retained so that the county board can have a second pair of eyes, and with one exception, the county boards have approved that in 164 out of 164 cases. And I think it's a useful process. The legislature likes it. No school district has ever failed to seek a waiver. One tried, and they backed down. And even though I'm, pride myself on being reasonable and a nice person, I took that district to court, and essentially they capitulated. I don't want to do that again. This is not that district. This is a district where we teach our children that minorities deserve respect. This is a district where we do not put on the ballot, shall we comply with the Voting Rights Act. That is something that has not been attempted in this state ever. We don't put that to a vote of the people. That is the law, that is the civil rights law, and we should have it respected. I mean this. If you do that, you are doing what Orville Faubus did when he went to the Arkansas legislature and said, we don't like this federal law. We don't want to protect minorities. This is not an issue that goes to majority vote. And if you take it there, the courts are going to say, you've just made the plaintiff's case even more compelling, because you've proven beyond the shadow of a doubt that the majority is denying the rights of the minority to vote. Don't do that. Please don't do that. That's not what this district is. I hope that wouldn't be the outcome, but it's a waste of money in one case, and it's a catastrophe in the other. There's no winner.
Thank you. Don Stauffer.
Hello again. The fact is, the district is going to be moving towards single-member districts, one way or the other. And it can either happen through seeking a waiver or through going through a lawsuit or other tactic. But the end result is the district is going to have single-member districts. So I urge you to support this and just get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Carlos Alcala.
Please excuse me if I repeat something the other speaker said. I woke up a couple of weeks ago and I couldn't hear, so I had to get hearing aids, and when people talk like this, I really can't hear them, so I might repeat some things. Today, I believe there are two ways that this process can go. One of the processes is to have a waiver which the legislature provided for so that school districts could save initially in the first step about $100,000. In the long run, they serve about $1 million on the waiver process. The other process that you can go is to have an election. The election doesn't mean anything, it doesn't go anywhere, it costs $100,000. At the end of the process, the election is whether or not to go to court. You can decide that today and save $100,000. If you decide to go to court, just do it. Don't spend $100,000 of the kids' money and risk another $1 million for a dumb vote to have a symbolic election. That is the wrong process, and that is why the legislature allows you to save all that money and avoid all this. It's possible to spend $1,100,000 or more and end up exactly where you are today. And you'll end up with single-member districts, but it'll cost you $1,100,000. I consider that to be a waste of money. I also consider that to be irresponsible. This could be the most fiscally irresponsible decision you will ever make. If you choose, I think, to go to the election, because you end up right in the same place.
Thank you. Maria Grijalva.
Good evening. I'm hoping that you will choose to do the waiver and not spend money. There is a lot of good reasons that you want to choose a waiver, and that's, well, the main reason is to save the money, but the other good reasons is because it's doing what's right. And so if you don't choose a waiver, it's a really loud message that you're sending, and I'm really hoping that you do the right thing. It is the socially the correct thing to do, and morally the correct thing to do, and legally the correct thing to do. The California Voting Rights Act was made for that purpose, and there's really no reason why you don't want to follow the California Voting Rights Act, and so it's going to end up costing a lot of money, and so why do you want to spend money like that? It doesn't. It just doesn't make sense not to do the waiver. So I hope that you guys choose to do the right thing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay.
Let me ask Mr. Tunick to come up here for a second.
Mr. Tunick, you're being asked to please come up.
So just clarification on education code and the process. The process in law sets out that we are supposed to send, if we're making a switch, we're supposed to send this to an election. Otherwise, we can seek a waiver. But the waiver is a waiver from the law that says we have to go to an election. Is that correct?
So what the
understanding?
Yeah. So where we're coming from is and just take a step back. The CVRA doesn't actually talk much. Actually, doesn't talk at all about procedure. The CVRA is a prohibition. It says you can't do something unless, and the way to avoid liability under the CVRA is to make the change. So then you go look at. There's a provision in the elections code and then the education code as far as how do you actually effectuate that change. So that's now what we're looking at. The sections of the education code talk generally about changes as far as creation of trustee areas, rearrangement, changing the number of trustees. Those are all kind of grouped into sort of this broad reorganization concept. And what the education code says is that the board adopts a proposal, which is what you did with your resolution 2 meetings ago, I think. And that becomes a proposal to the County Committee on School District Organization. They have to either approve or deny it. And then it's that approval, under the law, that approval becomes an order of election. And that's what triggers the election. The waiver is much like any other waiver that a school district can request from the State Board of Education, essentially just removes that language from the education code for purposes of your district in this time period. So yes, it is essentially the status quo under the law is you have an election for any type of reorganization or change in trustee areas or creation of trustees. The waiver removes that language, or as the waiver has been used by these few hundred school districts, removes that language for purposes of this one action and then puts it back for going forward. Did that answer the question? It was a long answer.
Yeah, so what is the action actually there for then?
The what, the?
The election.
The election? Probably something, I think, trying to think where I've seen it used. I think probably, well, for one thing, it gets used in all, generally, I shouldn't say all, in reorganization. So if you have territory transfers, unifications, that type of reorganization of school districts, that also triggers the same sort of election requirement. That actually also has been and can be waived. I would think probably the state board would look differently at a request to change the number of trustee areas. So to actually to enlarge a board from 5 to 7 or 7 to 5 or something like that. That might be a different thing. That's not, I don't think, something that comes to the board as often. So it's hard to say. Realistically, that provision has probably been in there longer than I would know where it came from. It's in the 5,000s, and those sections have been in there for probably 70 or 80 years.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, we will now close. Sorry, whoops. Broke that there. The public hearing. Thank you. We will now move on to information and discussion items. 01, annual report of progress on the local performance indicators for the fall 2018 California School Dashboard. Okay.
Good evening, trustees, community members, superintendent cabinet. I'm here to provide information about the local indicators, which are part of the, local control funding formula law. What are local indicators? Local indicators are part of the priority standards under LCFF. They are indicators that are not, they don't come from state data, so they're locally determined. They're based on information collected locally, but the state board did approve templates and rubrics that we can use as a local district to rate our progress. And they are reported publicly on the dashboard. So the dashboard is scheduled to be released next month. Our obligation as a district is to provide the board with information about the local indicators, and then after that discussion, input that information to the dashboard so that the dashboard can show that when it is released in December. Technical issues. So here are the local indicators. Basic services, implementation of state academic standards, parent engagement, school climate, and the new one just released is access to a broad course of study. As you can see, these are items that are not easily quantified as an academic test score would be. So that's why they're determined locally. So performance is measured and reported on the dashboard in 3 categories: met, not met, or not met for 2 years. Now, this is a whole system of cycle of continuous improvement. So they're not talking about you met a certain goal. It's that you are making progress toward improvement every single year, and that you are measuring and reporting that progress. So if an LEA does measure and report progress, even if they're not quite where they want to be yet, that's a met. If they fail to do that, a not met, and then 2 years of not doing that, of course, would land a district into technical assistance. So the local indicator progress at WUSD includes self-reflection tools that the state board adopted as part of the new accountability system. We're using these tools to measure progress through a cycle of continuous improvement in alignment with our LCAP. The first one is basic services. And as you can see, the requirement is that the LEA annually measures its progress through the Williams settlement, which is a Williams audit our schools go through, usually the first couple of weeks of school, where they make sure that every student has access to safe and secure facilities, textbooks, and all the materials they need. We did complete the 2018 Williams audit in September with 100% compliance. So there's our check mark met for that one. I'm going to have to go back to this. The next one is implementation of state academic standards, which is ensuring that we are providing our students with access tools that they need to access the core Common Core standards of California state standards. So SBE did create a rubric, and I'm going to go back and show you our progress as rated by leadership team cabinet on our progress towards implementation of state standards. So the first one talks about professional learning, and that we have Common Core state standards, ELD is English language development, aligned to our English language arts standards, math, next generation science, NGSS, and history. Now the rating scale is 1, which is, you're just starting to look at it, all the way up to full implementation, which is 5. So you can see that ELA, we believe that we're at a 4, full implementation with new ELA curriculum adopted a couple of years ago, and the RCD units and aligning assessments. ELD and math, the same situation. Next generation science is in initial implementation as we're exploring options for curriculum and as things roll out from the state. And history is the same way. And the next one is that making sure that our instructional materials are aligned to academic standards. And as you can see, the ratings, ELA Common Core State Standards is English Language Arts. Again, our textbooks and our RCD, which is rigorous curriculum design units, are aligned to content standards fully at this point, and we are just implementing and sustaining that progress. ELD, not quite out of 5, but definitely into full implementation. Math, again, we have adoptions of approved curriculums and units. Next generation science and history are getting there. And then we're talking about, this is around professional development, and we're working on initial implementation in all areas here, continuing to work on collaboration on our late start or early out Wednesdays, our PLCs, walkthroughs, teacher collaborations, and continuing with the rigorous curriculum design units. And here are academic standards for all students. So again, career tech, we're really implementing that well. There's, I think, 8 or 10 courses going to Curriculum Council next week. Health education content standards are shifting and changing, so that's more of an initial implementation. PE is in full implementation. VAPA and world languages, we feel, is at initial implementation. So we completed the self-reflection tool to rate progress and shared it with the Board of Trustees, making this a MET item when we report on the dashboard. The next one is parent engagement. And for this item, we are required to provide a narrative summary of our progress toward seeking input and promoting parental participation in programs. So to do this, we will complete a narrative describing the community forums, our LCAP Parent Advisory Committee meetings, our superintendent's coffee, our parent LCAP surveys, and site parental involvement activities. So we will explain each of those items, and I feel that we will fully meet that criteria. School climate, this one talks about, and I'm sure you all remember the California Healthy Kids Survey. It doesn't say that explicitly, but this is what it's referring to. LEA will provide a narrative summary of the local climate survey that captured a valid measure of students' perceptions, and then it has the grade spans. WUSD has administered the checks, or the California Healthy Kids Survey, every other year up until now. Beginning this year, it will be held annually, and that is in compliance with the 2-pay grant, which is McKinney-Vento, and it helps us too with this requirement. And those results are going to be reported to the board in the spring. The last report of that was last year. So the new one is access to a broad course of study. They've given us a couple tools. One is a chart where we can list what courses are offered, what percentage of our students have access and enrollment, and then there's also a narrative summary. We must address 4 prompts.
What tools are we using to make sure that we can measure access and participation? To what extent is there a broad course of study? What barriers are there? And if there are barriers, what are we doing to address those barriers? So this one's a little less easy to quantify, but we've met and talked about these, and it's something that we're working really hard to quantify using ARIES, which tracks our students' master schedules and our teachers' schedules. We use Illuminate. And to summarize the extent of access and enrollment in a broad course of study, we talk about our CTE and educational pathways, which are getting courses added all the time. Our dual immersion program, which is now up to 2nd grade. Our least restrictive environment, which is special education, where we are in differentiated assistance, really working in this area of providing our students identified as special ed into the mainstream. And we also have VAPA, that should be included there. Some of the barriers to our students accessing a broad course of study can be master scheduling, long-term English learners who must take some ELD support and may not be able to take an elective that they might be interested in. There are gender gaps in some of our courses, and there are enrollment in special day class will limit students to probably a more narrow course of study. So those are some of the barriers. Our revisions will be to increase pathways, to continue to track participation, not just by participation, but by subgroup, and to recruit and engage all students in various pathways. We do this through continued implementation of multi-tier systems of support. So the revisions and new actions are, again, to increase the pathways, to continue to track participation, and to provide differentiated support for students identified as special education, to receive special education services. The release of the updated California School Dashboard is December 3rd. Embargo data will be released next week so that LEAs can look at the data and make sure that there are no mistakes or if we needed to question anything, and then it will be released to the public. They say December 3rd. You never know if that'll happen, but I think it will be released in the next few weeks. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you. Does anyone have any? We have a comment. Very good. We have a public comment from Laura Jameson. Thank you. Oh, no question? Okay. All right. Board? Okay, thank you. Sarah Kirby Gonzalez?
Thank you. I think, for some people, learning the dashboard takes a little bit of time, and understanding that this discussion today is on local indicators and getting the local indicators onto the dashboard. I had community members reach out and ask questions about are you met, are you not met? And the state indicators are not like that, of course, right? They're increase, decrease. And so the language, I think, is so confusing for our community sometimes. So as this comes out, I hope that we continue to educate them on what does a local indicator mean versus the state indicator. And that is our job, of course, up here as well to do, which I know we're working on. My suggestion, or we move forward, and it's not anything for now, but moving forward, I think when we look at school climate, the Healthy Kids Survey is an important piece, but I would recommend our schools do more than that, because pouring through that data closely, it only gives you so much, and you can create, and what a lot of people are doing now in the PBIS conference that was just here in Sacramento pushed so hard, is to create a school survey of your own. Do you feel welcome here? How do you feel with your teachers? It's a little more specific to your site, and then you can give those to your students and then really pour over that data and really be able to look at your school climate a little bit with a better lens. And so I would just say, moving forward, as we continue to look at school climate, I think that we can start to hash out maybe a better way to even look at our own school climate, to be a suggestion.
On Monday, Superintendent Luna, Dr. Parsons, and myself, we attended a training at the Yolo County Office of Education. And as CD sometimes does, they are completely changing the dashboard in year 2. So we're in the process of getting trained on that, and so we will get a report. I'm sorry, what?
It's friendlier.
Supposedly.
Based on community input.
Supposedly. We'll see. We're getting trained on it, and we'll be given a report sometime in the spring to our Board of Trustees and also through our, not LPAC, LCAP PAC, Parent Advisory Committee. We'll be training our parents as well. In addition to the dashboard training, we also receive training on really looking at our LCAP goals and actions, which school climate is one of them, and coming up with what pieces of evidence can we gather to determine if we're meeting that metric for that action. So explicitly with school climate, we talked about, so what can we use to measure? We have ARIES, we have our MTSS, and what data pieces can we gather? So we'll be working with our Ed Services team to identify what would that evidence look like, so how we can measure it. And surveys to both students and parents were part of that work.
Good. Good. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. And I'm glad to see too, I know this is across the state in terms of the need to grow because the curriculum's not there yet with the NGSS and the history, social science, and I'm excited for when that time comes too.
I do want to acknowledge, as far as the NGSS and the history, that would probably be higher because there's been some incredible work done in the middle school and the high school in these areas, but it's not reaching down to K-5.
Yes.
We chose to focus on language arts and math because K-5 teachers are multiple subject. There was only so much the capacity that a teacher can handle. So really, if it was separated between secondary and elementary, the secondary is much farther in implementation.
Yeah, great. And I think that, thank you. And the only other question I had was VAPA. It says that VAPA is still an initial stage, and that was surprising to me to see. Sorry to make you keep getting up. Last one.
Well, not yet. I have questions.
For
So
me.
You might want to stay up.
Actually, if I can go ahead and comment on the VAPA, since I love it so much. What I would say on that is we are in the initial implementation phase of that. This past year, last school year, all of our VAPA teachers got together for the first time to really look at the national visual and performing arts standards and to begin the progression and the sequence of development of lessons and also the progress on how to show and monitor progress through their lessons. And it's more difficult, particularly in the system that we have as a wheel in the elementary stage. And we need to look a little bit further in our systemic view of VAPA, that we need to develop like a middle school feeder into high school so that there's progression and with high quality of instruction based on the national standards for visual and performing arts. So our teachers have been working really hard in aligning the work that they've been doing in VAPA to the national standards.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, thank you
Okay,
again.
and Board Member Wong also, I'm sorry, Sarah, did I cut you off? Okay, Board Member Wong has some
So
questions.
the local indicators need to be local, and the community needs to be engaged in it. I just want to hear kind of the background as to how, and I think the community would too, like to better understand how you actually determine the metrics and whether or not you went to the community to kind of engage them in this, especially when you talk about parent engagement in multiple languages. From my perspective, when you talk about a broad course of study, ethnic studies is important to some people, like just really the process by which you actually determined that these were the metrics by which you would evaluate yourselves or ourselves.
So to be totally transparent, this year with the new local indicators, we really took what the state board recommended that we use, and we used those tools. I think moving forward, we would make it our own to a greater extent. But this time, we just sort of took exactly what they gave us, and we used that.
So then it leads me to another question, that we knew that we needed to have local indicators for quite some time from the beginning of LCFF implementation. So the question bears the question of how engaged are our community members in the LCAP process, determining these and so on and so forth, right? So that's the intent of the law. I appreciate you being transparent, and that's transparency. But I think from my perspective, understanding that we are in a shift change with LCFF, moving forward to have more transparency with the community so that people aren't getting so many questions of how are we getting met, not met, because because they weren't engaged. And the intent of the law is to engage the community in multiple languages, multiple forms. I was there during the State Board of Education comments. So like people really were looking, the local advocates were really looking at these local indicators, trying to kind of get a foothold of the community voice in our investments and our plan. So I just want to kind of put that out there.
If I can just say, our LCAP PAC committee, Parent Advisory Committee, has been highly involved, and they're really building capacity. And I think this year they are really ready to take on that local indicator piece. Yeah. They've spent a lot of time talking about school climate and parent engagement and offering input onto actions.
But I would say across all of them, not just those things that you think are just parent engagement, just across all of them.
Yeah.
Right, and so, and then the PACs also happen during the school day where a lot of parents aren't, just again, different forms of inputting, getting input from the community, parents or otherwise. That's my offer to you, that I know when the LPAC meets, and it's usually during the day, and there are translators there, but just multiple forms of engagement in these metrics.
I agree, and I know that this year, moving forward, we'll be spending a lot of time on local indicators.
Okay, and I would like to just make a comment also on the community forums we're going to be having. Would be a great opportunity to present a lot of information to parents and the community at large on these indicators.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
And I look to you to help disperse all the confusion around the local indicators, because it is a confusing concept. So
it's not a confusing. It's a very empowering. If we talk about democracy tonight, it's a very empowering process for people to get engaged. So, and to I want us to actually ensure that to happen.
Yeah. It's a cycle of continuous improvement. It's not just one-time thing.
Yep.
So, thank you.
Okay, very good. So now we will move on to action items. Oh, actually, we need to provide some direction here, staff direction.
It's information.
It's informational?
It's information.
All right.
It's just information.
All right.
And discussion.
We've opened, all right.
Information discussion.
All right, so we are now moving on to our action items.
Oh, no, we have
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed,
information.
did I miss, I'm sorry.
Facilities.
Gosh, Chris, I am completely, thought I crossed that out accidentally. Facilities, immediate and long-term plan recommendation, this is where we have to give some direction.
I was really
Thank
excited.
you.
I thought I was going to be able to sit down, and we were skipping it.
No, just took the wrong glasses again.
Good evening, trustees and colleagues and community members. This evening is the next step that was requested by the board at our last facilities study, which is to come up with a plan after the 2 facilities study sessions and some of the data points that have been collected over the past 4 to 8 months, and to have a path forward after the last facilities study session a couple of weeks ago. So I put together a brief presentation just to sort of once again give the overview in a bigger picture, broader format, and then come forward with some recommendations of what we should be looking at moving forward to serve our community. And pardon me, I'm going to be going back and forth with glasses because I didn't wear the bifocals tonight, and I'm realizing it's a stretch. So presently, after the board study sessions, we asked that we recommend some next steps tonight to move forward. We have done a comprehensive facilities assessment, including a demographic study, utilization, capacity, going actually through current utilization as well as historical utilization and the purpose built of each campus to determine the status of the facilities, their use, as well as current need. We've done an analysis and a review of the capital improvement program and the projects completed in the last 5 years, or all projects completed since the implementation of Measure V, which was what that last 5 years is, as well as projects currently online. Current year Measure V and Fund 25 projects completed so far this year, just in the last 6 to 8 months, telephone and data upgrades district-wide, secure fencing and entry to the high school, a new Elkhorn parking lot, some of the fire alarm upgrades that were actually called out in Measure V, as well as some of the HVAC Prop 39 work. Still in process this year. Additional fire alarm upgrades, we'll be working on those throughout the summer and completing them hopefully by the end of this summer. as well as the additional HVAC Prop 39 work, and of course, Bright Phase 2, the comprehensive Bright Plan was begun actually in 2014, and the final steps of that are now underway as well. The other thing that we've been working on the past few months is to reconstitute the CBOC, the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee. The CBOC membership has been very active and loyal, but we were down to about 5 to 6 active members. And I'm happy to report that not only are we back up to an active 14 members, but we had a large community turnout at the last CBOC meeting, which was not only very productive in the oversight of the financials of the district's bond, which is the purpose of a CBOC, it's the statutory purpose, but we engaged in a very lengthy and detailed discussion about facilities as well at that meeting. We had a large community turnout for that meeting, which was very positive. I enjoyed the interaction, the staff did, as did the community, and it was a good opportunity for dialogue. So that's been good. We've also been able to take some time, step back, and work on some of the project reconciliation of the bond funding. People that work in public education, typically in K-12, aren't always as focused on what is project-based accounting, because we do each fiscal year as its individual thing, and project-based accounting can actually go into multi-year formats and tracking. So that's something else we've been working on. All that to say that we've been reconciling all of the Measure V funding, because one of the questions when I arrived that no one could answer was how much funding is left, right? Which seems like sort of a rudimentary question. And when you get into project-based accounting, it actually isn't, especially since school financial systems can only look at 1 year at a time, and projects go over multiple years. So we have reconciled that. We have approximately $15 million left in Measure V funding. And we have put all non-essential projects on hold that were scheduled in Measure V until we had a clear path forward and a path that we were comfortable with. One other thing that's important to mention is at the last facilities meeting, we also did discuss bond, and we did conduct polling to determine the community's level of support of a bond, and we did find out, to our pleasant reaction, that the community is continuing to be willing to support bond issuance in the district, which begged the question, actually at the past couple of meetings we have, well then why didn't we go out for a bond in November if we're coming to the end of the issuance? And without a master plan, so that we are really focused in what we are doing for our facilities and for our district, we think it's best to wait until we have a detailed master facilities plan before we ask our community for their continued support. So I just wanted to make sure that we clarified that as well. Recommended next steps. This is a two-pager, so we're going to have to be a little patient with this. So the next steps, what are we doing now? What do we need to do now? Covers quite a bit of territory. When you get into facilities and you get into 14 facilities over 120 square miles, serving almost 8,000 students, you get into some really nitty-gritty complexity. It's almost like a very complex puzzle. And so the immediate recommendations, the first one, which goes along with what I was just mentioning, is that we develop an RFQ for an agency to develop a 20-year master facilities plan that meets the needs of the district's children and stakeholders. What we've done in the past is to go out and develop a capital improvement program, which basically just says, what is the hopes and dreams, and let's just get every facility there. And with adjusted inflated dollars, which we talked about at the last facility study session, that plan costs more than the capacity of the district or the community to sustain, not just now, but $260 million is not sustainable. So that plan didn't give us a pathway forward, it just gave us an overview of what it would cost to do everything, right? So the next step is really to go out in a more focused manner, look at where our community is now, look at where our children are now, look at our facilities now, and to make a plan so that we're very, very focused with the future expenditures of the bond money as well as any other funds that the district applies to facilities. The next recommendation is that this coming year that we move the Middle College Charter High School to the refurbished Bright location as it continues to expand so that the students are at a more appropriate site and co-located with the CTE students from RCHS. This is for a number of reasons. For practical purposes, that campus is more appropriate for secondary students. Currently, the Middle College High School is located in an elementary school campus, which was purpose-built that way. It's a little bit of a mismatch. Secondly, for utilization. In its planning and implementation, the district has developed and continues to develop Bright as an alternative and location for high school students for CTE instruction and for adult ed to better utilize that site and the investment we've made in that site rather than having small programs located at large facilities throughout the district. We're looking to move the programs for those secondary students to fewer campuses and consolidate and make better use of those resources. This also strengthens partnerships between the high school, between CTE, and between the middle college program. And the middle college program is a nationally recognized successful program, the program that's being offered by the Middle College Charter. And it's growing. It doubled in size this year, and they are hoping at the full implementation to have 280 students. The third recommendation is to work with Yolo County to develop a comprehensive MOU in a minimum of 5-year increments for the county to take over the operations and management of Alice Norman while locating all county programs to a single site. What does that mean? We currently host a host of county programs. Those programs serve our students. Which is why we value them so much. It's why we have been in partnership with the county. However, we've spread those programs throughout the entire district. And it sometimes can be a little disruptive because then we have multiple programs located on sites, or we co-locate and we run out of room in some ways, versus having all of those county programs on a single site where the county can help the district to maintain the facility and to bring all of those programs together in a central location for us. And so what are we looking for from the county in seeking an MOU? We're looking for the county to help us continue to maintain those programs and the value of them locally, but also help us with maintaining a site that they're making full use of. In other words, to enter into that partnership so that they can help, for example, with utility costs, with maintenance costs, rather than every single campus housing 1, 2, 3 different county programs spread throughout the entire district. The next recommendation is to approach local partners, such as the Parks Commission, to work on incorporating some existing property into the Master Parks Plan in order for them to access grant funding for redevelopment, which the school district can't access on its own. So, for example, we might attempt to preserve, as some community members at CBOC approached me about, preserve salvageable portions of local history, and one of the ones that the local community voiced they were very attached to was, for example, the gymnasium. They call it a number of things. It's the Quonset Hut Gymnasium. Mm-hmm. It was actually designed by a Korean War veteran that used to design for the arms administration during the Korean War. So we can't necessarily preserve historically facilities like that with our current resources. However, if we work with local commissions that can access grant money for preservation and community use, we would have those opportunities. So I'm seeking permission tonight also to look at those partnerships and to ask them if they'd be willing to co-write grants with us to be able to do that type of work. To redevelop fields, parks, and green spaces, as the board and the community is very aware. We've worked with the Parks Commission for a long time in developing parks. We have co-use parks that are open to our students during the day that the city then maintains for us, and then are open to the community in the evenings and on the weekends. So we need to look at more opportunities such as those for some of our locations. We need to include in that proposal, this is a local name, this is not one I made up, this is what they're referred to. We need to include the rat warehouses. People say to me, well, where are those? They're actually part of the district office complex. We have an old distribution center that has mostly been taken over and given to a local park, and those warehouses have been deemed unsafe and have actually been closed for a number of years.
Are there rats in them?
Pardon me?
Are there rats in them?
I'm not going to comment on that at this time. However, I do believe that the name came from some situations when they were in active use a while ago, which is why they're referred to as the rat warehouses. If you're looking for their location, they're on the corner of Evergreen across from the district office.
Yeah.
They're the sort of fabricated metal sheds that are about 2 stories high that have been there actually since the late 1930s. And they are not considered safe for use anymore, and they have been closed down. And of course, that's not particularly useful for a school district, right? So they're on that corner.
They're good for the rats.
They're good evidently for all sorts of potential wildlife, yes, yes. The current Westmore Oaks campus is also, and that's actually the reference to the gymnasium that the community members approached me about. What parts of that can we preserve, knowing that it might not be purpose-built for its current use of housing a K-8, but that there are portions of it that are very important to the community historically. So we're seeking partnership solutions for things like that, as well as the relocation of our own assets, such as the solar panels on that campus. We also would like to include the rear portions of the Fallbrook location as potentially a day-use park so that we can bring that back online for student and community use. It's currently sitting fallow. The Fallbrook location, the land, as well as the actual school itself, is actually one of the most beautiful in the district, and it's been closed up for a number of years. It's currently where Middle College is located, but the land itself, the live oak trees, as well as the facility that was built on it that we have continued to maintain, is a beautiful facility and piece of land. So, what does that mean? That means that I would like permission to work with architects to redesign the original home of Westmore Oaks. I like to consider this, that's the Fallbrook location. I like to consider this a homecoming. That is the original home of Westmore Oaks. It's the very property that I'm referencing and referring to as beautiful. The school itself was purpose-built as an elementary school. The campus is far more suitable as an elementary school. And it's only a block and a half away from the existing Westmore Oaks. So a return home for Westmore Oaks is what I'm suggesting is our next step there. This also meets criteria for the Measure V bond as it modernizes a school that was purpose-built as an elementary, that we've maintained it's in good condition, and it is on a beautiful lot. This makes full and vibrant usage of an existing school, as well as preserving the history that the city is looking to preserve and our citizens are so anxious about. This means developing a phased-in construction plan that begins to relocate some of those classes and grade levels to newly refurbished as well as new built spaces, and that should say at the Fallbrook campus, as early as August of 19. This also means that we need to potentially activate a 7-Eleven committee to deal with any property that is determined to be excess for the district.
The 7-Eleven committee.
Pardon me?
What is a 7-Eleven committee?
A 7-Eleven committee is a committee of community members as well as employees that make recommendations on how to use property for a district. A district is not able to just randomly determine that they want to dispose of property, for example. They can enter into an MOU like we've done with many of our properties that we've turned into parks, because we're not disposing of them, we actually retain ownership of them. But if we want to do anything beyond that, we would have to engage a 7-Eleven committee. That 7-Eleven committee makes recommendations to the board, which the board then acts on.
Let me ask you a quick question. So in turning to a timeline for grades to be moved over to the Fallbrook campus, how do you phase that in? What are the grade levels?
At this point, I mean, I could take a wag, but that's not what I would like to do. I prefer to have it planned out, and then I can answer more firmly. The existing classrooms that are usable at Fallbrook after some modernization are a full 17. In other words, every single one of them. And so that modernization means that we're not new building, which is it's much faster process than building from scratch. Further, the structure and the classrooms themselves are in very good condition. And so that modernization process won't take nearly as long. So we have at this point, what I believe to be 16 or 17 classrooms that in fairly short order, we can bring back online as an elementary school campus.
So we could have students in there as early as next year?
Potentially. Now, we need to this is when we need to bring in somebody to master plan the campus and to do a phase-in timeline so that I can answer that more confidently, which means having engineers, architects, and evaluators actually crawl through the facility in more detail with me and come up with that plan and timeline.
So Chris, I also have a question on that facility. How many would it accommodate? How many students is the capacity there?
The current capacity?
How many, yes, how many could it?
The current capacity is only about 450.
What's your expanded capacity that you're proposing?
The expanded capacity would handle all of the current students of Westmore Oaks.
Which is how many off the top of your head?
As of this week, 658.
Okay.
Or, sorry, transposed 685.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, any other questions?
He's still going through.
Still going.
He's still going.
Sorry, Kobe, go ahead.
Oh, no.
I said he's still
Chris
going.
is still going.
Chris, okay.
No,
Chris is not done.
I'm just
No, we
pausing
know.
because I know it's
See if any questions in
pause.
between.
a lot of details, so I am pausing for
right.
questions, yeah. So in 1920, so that would be the immediate planning permission that I'm seeking to go ahead with. In 19 and 20, I'd like to continue to work with local partners and the Parks Commission to purposefully and thoughtfully redevelop those spaces that were mentioned earlier, as well as look for a new home for the MOT, the Maintenance, Operations, and Transportation Facilities of the district. I'd like to redesign, build, and modernize the Fallbrook campus in that year. So beyond the modernization, actually begin to stick build, which means that we actually build out the facility per your question, Trustee Pizzotti, to accommodate the full population of Westmore Oaks. And then develop a plan to co-locate the district offices to Yolo High School campus across the street and close the Evergreen campus. The Evergreen campus, by the way, is the current district office. Somebody said, what's the Evergreen campus? So I've been looking up the names of them, with a relocation of the solar panel arrays. Please note that I keep saying the solar panel arrays because we still use those as collateral for some of the loans that we have. So we have to preserve those. Those have to be a part of our plan. Okay. And then in January to November, we need to then start planning for a bond authorization after we have a master plan. So after we get a master plan in beyond these first initial steps, we then need to look for the authorization to continue the modernization and build out of the district. Going even further out, in 2021, look for that new bond in November of 2020 and begin phase 2 of the build. So this assumes that the restoration of the original home of Westmore Oaks will take the full remaining bond authorization of Measure V to modernize and build out so that it's expanded and in good shape for the return of the students to their home campus. And then to complete also that year the move of the MOT department and the district offices by the end of 2021. And then look at what can we do with the Evergreen campus, the current district office at that point, the former one, with the Planning and Development Commission. In 2021 through 2023, continue with the Master Facilities Plan, which at that point we'll be looking at a district-wide deferred maintenance plan. What does that mean? That means district-wide modernization of existing facilities, as well as looking at the south end where we expect expansion at that point and begin looking at building a new K-8 campus in the south end of the district. At that time, we should also be looking to modernize existing north side and central campuses which have not received modernization. Some of the ones I've put there are suggestions based on the current facility quality and the level of upkeep. The next 5 years from 23 to 28, we should revisit the MOU for Alice Norman and see where we are with the county, as well as continue to implement the master facilities plan. This is also the time that we should be looking, as we expect the continued growth of our secondary students, to see how Bright is doing with CTE as well as the middle college program, and to see whether we need to commence the construction of the long-awaited performance facilities at River City High School. At that point, we would also have to visit the finance options and see when we would have to phase in another bond after 2028. And I'm going this far out because it was requested. So
No, we appreciate it.
I know it
It
gets a
was-
little vague at that
No,
point, which is
no.
why we need the master plan, but that is, I did go out per the board's request. From 2028 to 2033, we would continue the new master facilities plan with probably a second K-8 school in the Southport expansion area in the south of the district, as well as modernizing any final schools that had not received modernization in the north and central parts of the district. As well as refresh. At that point, people are saying, well, wait a second, now you're listing the newest schools in the district. Well, at that point, it'll be 30 years after they're built, they will also need refreshing at that point, which is why I'm listing Stonegate and Bridgeway, our two newest schools. At that point, we'll also need the money to refresh. From 2033 to 38, we would continue that with any additional refreshes and construction needed in the district. So to summarize, because that was a lot of stuff, but I had to get it all down in writing to make sure that it was somewhere to look at. The direction that's been requested tonight over the course of all those slides is to move forward with a master planning RFQ, to move forward with all aspects of an RFQ to modernize the Westmore Oaks campus at the Fallbrook campus, the original home of Westmore Oaks, to move forward with all aspects of moving Middle College High School to the Bright campus for the 1920 school year, co-located with CTE, and to move forward with partnering with parks and granting organizations to help move MOT, to help move our solar, and to address the removal of items such as the rat warehouses and redevelopment of the parks commissions. I can't find another name for them, I'm sorry, but that is what they're listed as. I know we've had the same reaction. Is that the only name we can find? As well as work on a plan to assist with the existing Westmore Oaks, what we are referring to as the Clarendon campus, because once you start calling campuses all by the same name, it gets a little confusing, for both MOT as well as community use, while preserving portions of that campus to commemorate the importance of local history for the community. And then work on securing assistance with the rear portions also of the Fallbrook campus, because at that point it should be completely built. Now we're all done. Thank you for your
Any
patience.
questions? Okay, we have some public comments here. Thank you. First one is from Laura Jameson.
Hi, good evening. Okay, I've got 3 minutes for lots of questions. So I guess that there seems to be a lot of work to be done in the next couple of years, and I guess it's just not clear if Measure V can pay for all of it, the existing remaining Measure V funds. I'm guessing the 20-year plan is going to come out of Measure V, or I guess just get some clarity of where the master plan is going to come out of. Same with the revamping the Fallbrook campus. It's not clear if all of that can be done with the existing Measure V, especially with some of the work that's going to be done at Bright Phase 2, at least for the moving for the next year. Let's see, on the long-term plan, one of the concerns I have, it says going out for a new bond in somewhere in 2023 to 2028. So that would be another bond. I guess I would encourage the district to look at funding. I understand we're going to need a bond short-term to do some work. But as we start getting out to 2023, 2028, if the district can explore other mechanisms other than bonds, this is just increasing our debt load. And I think if we have a plan soon enough and we can tell the public what the long-term plan is, I think the long-term plan, or the community would be more receptive to parcel tax increases rather than bonds, because at least if we have parcel tax increases, all of that money will come to our schools. And I have no problem paying more taxes. I know a lot of this community is okay paying more taxes, especially if all that money goes to our schools. I don't like paying banks 1/3 to 1/2 of my tax dollars. So I would encourage for the longer term range plans to find other mechanisms other than bonds. What else? Sorry, it wasn't clear. I guess just to get some additional clarification on what would happen with the Clarendon campus, it sounds like right now it can handle 450 students, but there's 685. So I guess what would it cost to get that campus ready for the 450 students for the first phase of moving kids to the Clarendon campus? And I guess I don't know of what that Clarendon campus, the old Westmore Oaks, I can't remember which street the old Westmore Oaks, to get the old Westmore Oaks ready for kids, what would it take? And I don't know if are there science wings there, so what would be needed to get the students there in August of 2019? And then what would it take after that to get the remaining students over there? And then a lot of this hinges on partnerships with the city. I don't know if the city's going to have these budgets to do work on the parks and the green spaces. So that's just something that needs to be considered very carefully because the city has problems too. So, okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Don Stauffer.
Hello again. I also have some questions. What will be the capacity at Bright once the proposed remodel is complete? That's one. Is it going to have room actually for a full-blown CTE program plus the early college prep charter? I remember one of the discussions at the facilities meeting had to do with the number of facilities that Washington Unified is operating and maintaining in the city, and the discussion of perhaps eliminating some of those facilities. So far, the only one, at least from this proposal, that sounds like it might be on the chopping block would be the existing district office. If I'm understanding the proposal, talking to the Planning Commission about that facility after everybody moves across the street. Anyway, I'm just wondering what actual facilities are being proposed for closure in these proposals, if any, and especially what are the cost implications for closing facility. Because you can't just leave it abandoned. I assume there's issues with abandoning a facility as well. Would love more clarity on what the actual move might look like for Westmore Oaks from Clarendon over to Fallbrook in terms of will it be phased? Who's going first? And all of that. Then MOT, the question is, they have very specialized needs, especially in regards to the buses and the corporate yard. So I was wondering if any more thought has been put into it. One thing I noticed was nothing said about Riverbank, and actually someone read this proposal and assumed that the district was now going to close down Riverbank, and I said, no, that's ridiculous. The district's put a lot of funds in there, and that campus is in really good shape. So I'm assuming it's not mentioned because it doesn't have a great amount of need at this point. Right. Anyway, so that's all I've got right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions or comments?
Chris, can you come back up here, please? So there was a question raised about parcel tax. And why don't you explain the voting threshold difference between bond and partial tax?
Wow. It depends upon the mechanism that you use for bond or partial tax. It can be as high as 65%. It can be as low as 55%, depending upon the statute that you use. We tend to go for the lower one, which is a GO bond, which is 55%. And the initial bond authorization does cost money. Cost transactional dollars, which is usually what a broker takes out, but then the entire amount does come to the district for whatever the purpose of the bond authorization. So we don't pay interest on the bond. What actually happens is the taxpayers basically, as a large group, because there's so many taxpayers, they all pay a small portion of the bond principal and interest, like a loan, to each individual home. but that money goes directly to paying off the bond with the county. All of the bond proceeds go directly to the district to spend within the confines of the GO bond. So a parcel tax, again, depending upon the mechanism you use, is between 60 and 66% authorization, and that is an ad valorem amount per student that's typically raised by household. Again, it's an assessment of typically a square footage or a value of a house, and it has to be specified in the language of the parcel tax. So for example, there are parcel taxes, and parcel taxes can sunset. In other words, they end after a period of time, or they can be permanent, depending upon the language of the authorization. So for example, a parcel tax that you'll see fairly common occurrences, particularly in large districts, would be like an extracurricular parcel tax. So a parcel tax that raises money specifically to pay for extracurricular program, whether that's drama, music, athletics, so that is preserved locally. Mm-hmm. For all time, and it doesn't get affected by the ups and downs of a school budget cycle. You can do a parcel tax for all sorts of things. So the district, my last district, we had a library parcel tax that was there just for the preservation of the library system in the district, and that was a 20-year parcel tax. So after 20 years, it would expire unless you went to the voters and got it reauthorized prior to the expiration of it. I've seen parcel taxes for maintenance of facilities. I've seen parcel taxes specifically for transportation and for busing. It really depends on what the interest of the local community is if they're interested in a parcel tax.
Yeah. And I'll just, I don't remember what the exact number was, but the bond survey that we did, or the poll that we did show it passing, but just barely. So, in terms of, I mean, a bond and a parcel tax are two different questions, but in terms of the amount people are willing to pay, reaching a 65 or 66% threshold is incredibly difficult to do. Especially when we have several taxes already. We had the Measure E, we had the Measure N that barely passed with 50%. So those are, while they're different things, I'm not saying they're apples to apples. I'm just saying that taxes are an incredibly different and difficult thing to get passed. While I do believe we do have an electorate and that is very willing to pony up money for their school system because they want an outstanding place for their children to go to school and learn, I think a parcel tax may be very difficult for us to achieve. I would love for that to happen, though. Anyway, I'll let other people, I have more questions, but you can go back to me on others.
Okay, so Sarah Kirby-Gonzalez and then Jackie Wong, and then I also have questions if they're not already going to be asked.
Thank you for this. I can understand why it is causing, as we heard earlier, a little bit of anxiety and of the unknown. These are big ideas here. And we asked you to help us create a plan, and you certainly did it. Thanks outside the box. And so thank you for bringing this forward. But I do acknowledge that that these are big changes. And then it's also helping me get back to the original names of streets too, of course, as we work through a few questions. So it looks like they, you mentioned about 50 million left, and that is after Bright Phase 2 is complete of Measure V, or is that not without?
Correct. So Bright, the entire Bright project, which they end up breaking into two phases for construction purposes, is already encumbered in Measure V funds. Yep. So the entire amount's encumbered, including Phase 2, and so the 15 million was putting on hold and reconciling all completed projects or projects that had not yet begun. So the Bright Phase 2 was already encumbered.
Okay. And so The question then comes up just one more time because we talked about our students who are, when they're at Bright, being able to be there half the day. And so they're taking their pathway class, and they're also be able to take like a core English or math class. Would that still be able to happen? Would our capacity work where we could still have students who are there from River City for half of the day? I'm just thinking about how much they'd be bused back and forth if not, and trying to understand the capacity at that site.
I'm only pausing because I don't want to step on the feet of my colleagues in the room.
Okay.
So I used to be in the program game, but I'm not any longer. And so whatever answer I'm going to give, I'm going to expect Andy to be shaking his head no and disagreeing with me. So there's all sorts of possibilities and how they use that and transportation. So I do run transportation. We will run whatever transportation plan we need to accommodate the program that is developed for Bright. However, when we complete Bright Phase 2, we will have quadruple the number of open classrooms right now.
Yeah.
And those classrooms are being outfitted in a very robust way as far as infrastructure, so they can serve a number of needs. And they were designed by Andy and his staff in collaboration with the architects to be that robust. So even though we're developing them, for example, as medical services, CTE program, those classrooms, while they might serve medical services, CTE, also have other periods that they could be used. So we will have, I believe it's a total of, I hate not having the plan in front of me right now, I think it's 12 or 13 classroom spaces after the completion of Phase 2, which not only would accommodate far more than what's currently at Bright and more than what is at Middle College in use, it would accommodate the expansion of those over the next several years.
Okay, so it'll be worked closely with curriculum and,
Yes.
Okay. All right, okay. The next piece would be, so as we think about that Measure V money, in terms of relocating solar, I remember these discussions too well, in terms of where the solar goes and solar on the ground and the costs of raising solar up and whatnot. So I just imagine that, one, if, say, district office is one of those where we have the 7-Eleven committee, and they decide that that land can be sold and is not needed, the solar array cannot be sold with that or as well. We need to take it and move it, correct? Is that what you're saying?
Because of, I mean, so I'm a good generalist in all of these areas, but the reason that I also want the master plan, I need experts.
Okay.
So, and not just in the construction part. So I'm good at the planning part. I can implement a plan really well, but I'm not going to draw the plans, right? Not my specialization. So the solar, as an example, and it's a good one because it's throughout the district. We want the solar. We still owe money on the solar for a long time. And so I don't think, from my perspective, reading through those agreements, that we can just get rid of the solar while we still owe money on it, because that's actually the collateral that we use to secure the loan in part. So it could potentially be costly, or if it's too costly to move, do we then make sure that whatever we do with the property continues to accommodate the solar that's already in place there? So there are options. I don't know what the absolute correct option is, because I'd want an expert to say to me, here are your 4 options and here are the 2 best ones as far as what the needs of the district are.
Okay.
But my eye is definitely the needs of the district and our students, right? So that's really the eye that I'm putting on all of this.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm almost there. I'm looking at, of course, it's hard for me to even imagine YOLO with all of district office and everything there, so I'll leave that up to you all to figure out in terms of what that looks like and entrances look like. I imagine if we give you the green light tonight to move forward this plan, that there are steps that it's going to come back to us regularly?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So what I'm looking for permission, because we don't have a master facilities plan, it puts us in this sort of odd spot where a project can just sort of be approved, started or stopped without any plan. And that's one of the reasons I'm asking for us to actually develop a comprehensive plan, so that we have not just for me, but I always imagine a time where I'm not here or somebody else is sitting at the dais. And so we need to adopt that plan. I look at it like bumpers in bowling, right? So that we stay within the lane and you don't just go off into the gutter, right? And we've really suffered in a way the district has suffered because our current facilities, finances, maintenance, deferred maintenance is all sort of a result of not having a plan, right? So it changes and it's not very reflective or thoughtful. So the plan's really the part that keeps us on track, and that plan would give you the detail of the next 15 or 20 years of what we're doing. When you approve that plan, that sets the bumpers for the next 15 to 20 years.
Yes, we want a plan.
Yeah.
That's why we didn't put it on the ballot. I mean,
Right.
so yeah, you're not speaking to a choir. We want the plan. I just want to make sure we don't say, yes, green light this, and then we don't see, that there's checks and balances along the way, that you come to us at incrementally is what I'm saying.
Yep,
That's what I'm
tonight,
asking.
what you're authorizing me to do is to start all of the planning and research and hiring folks to see what we can do.
Okay.
So for example, I heard some questions about, how far does that 15 million get us? Well, I know it's gonna get us the modernization portion, but how far is it gonna get us? I need a pricing expert to come in and actually price that out so I can answer that with confidence.
Okay, sure. And then I only have, I'll go quick on my last one, so I apologize. And then just to bring light, so it sounds like as you bring others in that this might be fleshed out more. I remember looking at portables, I believe at Elkhorn and Bridgeway Island were the oldest portables that you had said we're not gonna make it much longer. And so I was just making sure as we look at this list and we see the refresh, if that is those old portables that are already maybe maxed out, that they can make it that long?
This gets into talk about a ring of, or a string of dominoes, huh? So as we reconfigure old sites and modernize them, every portable has to be assessed to see if it has remaining life, and the cost of relocating it to replace an older portable somewhere else, or whether it's better to refurbish that portable, or whether it's better to slate those portables for reconstruction. What I would like to get out of is the portable domino business. We have almost as many portable classrooms now in the district as we do stick-built or permanent ones. And what that does is means we constantly have to be moving them around or refreshing them or knocking them down. And so part of the master plan will focus on what's the replacement schedule, and it's not replacement with more portables. It'll be replacement with permanent brick and mortar space, so that we have something that's a bit more reliable than a 20-year lifespan.
And then I'll just end with the key to communication. I know we have our forums coming up, and then I really appreciated the message that went out to staff about facilities and here's what's happening. And so just that communication is, from Superintendent Luna, that communication is so clear in terms of what's being looked at with our families, with our students, and with our staff who is anxious to know what all this means and looks like. Yeah.
Okay, very good. Jackie Wong?
So thank you for actually enacting one of our board goals. So in terms of these 25 years or plus, whether or not any of us will be here or not, I think it's very, very, very helpful. Just to kind of envision what it might look like in the future. I just want to be very clear that we can't do this without bringing in any more revenue, because all of this will cost money. And I just want to be clear that what your projection is that we need to do it in 2020. Right, that's what the timeline is saying, that it's something we need to bring in revenue in 2020. What I also appreciate about the master plan is that whenever the state gives out bonds and whatnot, there are other districts who have been ahead of us because they have their plans in place. So the fact that we can actually create a master plan and that we can have the people, for all transparency, hire the people, hire the architects, hire the soil testers before, so we can just submit, so we can be first in queue versus the last in queue, because the last time we barely made it. Just be transparent for the community that part of this is that if you see contracts being brought forth because of this plan, is because we are preparing ourselves for these grants that the state will release, is my understanding, and as I've learned more about the bond process, the bond release process from the state, that we all as a state vote for, that if we're not prepared to submit on day one, we might not ever get it.
Yep.
So I just want to clarify that that's one of the reasons why people will start saying, well, we haven't yet moved, we haven't yet built, why are we hiring this architect, or why are we soil testing? So I just want to be transparent, is that the reason why versus because we a theoretical future?
Yes, the more plans that we have approved and in the queue, even if we complete a plan and 10 years later the bond money is approved, then we get that money when it becomes, so typically the old state percentage was almost 50%, 40%. But if you don't have something that's been completed in the queue, you don't get the money, right? So you have to have it in the queue. Now, some people are saying there will never be more money, but you can't predict these things. We have to have things in the queue. We've missed out too many times, quite frankly.
Because I think that's a very key point to consider, just keep on kind of informing the public on this process and all the money that we've actually missed because we weren't prepared. And so the other thing is that trying to better understand as we move forward the role of the 2x2 as we think about city partnerships and how that will play out. Just kind of thinking about that because we do have a 2x2 meeting. We don't meet that often, but I think that's, what is the role in all that? With that said, I am in favor of kind of you beginning conversations with staff, seeing what the possibility is. But I know that the public, also wants to be involved in 2x2 is one of those forums where people see the communication between the city and the school district. And lastly, because it seems like the move from the Westmore Oaks homecoming, if you will, is soon, and just wanting to, I know that staff has been informed, and just kind of making sure that community and staff are informed as to why that's happening and how that will happen in a way that feels a little bit safe, right? Because it seemed, I've been on both campuses. The Fallbrook campus is beautiful, and in some ways, just more manageable for K-8 students, right? So just really cognizant of kind of the community involvement and being in touch and high touch with the community staff and administration. So those are my comments.
All right, great, and thank you, because I was going to ask and also make the point that we need to get that out there. We have missed too many opportunities, so I'm glad that Board Member Wong brought that up. Chris, you obviously need some direction from this board, so to proceed with this master plan, we need something obviously much more detailed, much more comprehensive. The board has spoken about how we really want to encourage everyone to come to these community forums so they can give their input, their recommendations on, how they want WSD to grow, to be there for our children in the future. So at this point, I do have some questions about, right, but since we're looking at M5 for action later, I guess I can ask some questions at that point. I guess we can proceed with a motion.
Well,
I'm sorry.
I wanted to come back to a
Oh,
couple
I'm sorry,
questions,
okay. Board Member Pizzotti still had some questions, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, it's not so much questions, more of comments. It's in terms of moving forward with the direction, engaging the community and educating the community about what our needs are is going to be, I think, really tantamount to whether or not we have success or failure in 2020 if we go forward with the bond. So having a plan, a developed plan, and making sure that plan is clear to the community is something that we need to do a very good job of, all of us. I mean, all of us on the dais here, but also, all of us that are cabinet members and even staff need to be talking about what the plan is and making sure that the parents know, making sure that all of the community members know that, we need to start working for more money the minute we have a plan. And so that's just my comments to you guys. I hope that we can get that developed in short order. Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? All right. So someone like to, I think the direction we're going to give is to proceed with getting us a facilities plan, much more comprehensive, and detailed, and
And moving, I mean, with everything you, for me, everything you've outlined, including the plan and everything, the moving, all of that. So that's my proposal, to move forward with everything as
Chris, could we
proposed.
also have maybe like a timeline that might help some folks also? Just get a general timeline.
Yeah, the dates that I've outlined there, I also tend to over-prepare a little bit, and the person that helps me with so much of this, I saw that she came in this evening instead of watching from home, and that's Angie Nichols, who lives in the community.
I meant an immediate timeline, you know, like for when.
So we are going to be putting out an RFQ after tonight, pending
Okay.
your approval, for a master plan development. We actually have it prepared because we didn't want to waste any time, because we feel a sense of urgency as well. So.
Okay.
Board of Trustees, I just wanted to mention that we're very sensitive to the fact that we have to first bring this information to the board. We really want to honor that these are board decisions, board-given directions. So that's why we may not have the exact timelines and processes laid out, because first we need your blessing. And that's sometimes really hard for our community and for our employees, because we want to know details. We want to know the plan. But until we bring it to the board at our regularly scheduled meetings, and for the board to actually be together to discuss, we need your blessing, and we appreciate your confidence in us moving forward. And now we can really work on communicating a little bit more specifics about timelines, because now we can bring in the experts, because the board really sees what the plan is before we move out into our community. So thank you very much, board.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, now we are moving on to action items. P1 action, the adoption of resolution number 1819-11, requesting State Board of Waiver election requirements for alternative election system.
Do you have public comment?
Do we have, I'm sorry.
Is there anybody presenting on this,
I
or
believe
we
there
have
are-
public comment?
William, where are you? Oh.
There you go.
Good evening, Board. Once again, William Tunick with Dennis Walliver Kelly. So just by way of background, just kind of set up again how we got here, and I apologize, I've probably given the same explanation a few times, but for the benefit of the public who may not have heard this previously, all of these actions date back to a letter the district received in March of this year regarding concerns over whether or not the district's current at-large elections, which is what you have now, which you actually had last week, violated the California Voting Rights Act, which is a law that was passed in 2002 that essentially says that at-large elections may be found illegal by a court in certain factual circumstances. The board in April of this year adopted a resolution which indicated its intent to make the transition from at-large elections, which we have now, to by trustee area elections, which look more like Congress, House of Representative elections, where you have subdivisions within the district. There'd be 5 subdivisions for 5 seats. Since that time, over the past few months, I think it was about 6 or 7 months, the board had a series of public hearings as well as community meetings to look at the various maps, working with a demographer, and in, I believe it was September, adopted a resolution that selected one of those maps, which, as I mentioned previously, that action becomes a proposal to the County Committee on School District Organization. So that's essentially where we are to date, or where the board is to date. The other option, the question before the board tonight is whether or not when the County Committee on School District Organization reviews the proposal, and let's assume they adopt it for this purpose, whether that will then trigger an election in the district, a yes or no election on the proposal, or whether the district will, or the board will request a waiver from the State Board of Education of that election requirement, in which case the County Committee's approval would essentially be the last step in this process in the elections. If the waiver sought, the trustee area elections would be implemented before the November 2020 election. If the waiver is not sought, then that election would take place in 2020, which would mean that the elections would not, or the trustee areas would not be in place in 2020. So I think that's pretty much the kind of where you are. I wanted to mention one other thing as far as the state board waiver process. Part of what the process requires is that the district, in this case the superintendent, meet with various stakeholder groups. The state board wants to know what your employer organizations think about the waiver, what other district stakeholders, and I believe in this case we've spoken with all of them, and they're in support of the waiver. I think also not required, but something else I believe the board asked for was a survey of members of the community as to whether or not they supported the waiver or not. I'm trying to remember what the numbers were that came back. Maybe the superintendent.
The results of the community survey question was 39.6% stated that the district should hold an election on the particular issue. 56.6% stated the district should not hold an election on this issue. And there were 3.7% who actually went onto the survey with no response.
And again, that survey was not required. It also very clearly stated on there it wasn't binding on the board, but I think it was something the board wanted to do to get a sense of where at least part of the community was on this issue. So I think that's sort of the introduction. I'm, of course, happy to answer any questions about the resolution or the process.
Comments? Okay, very good. None from the board, but we have some public comments. Scott Rafferty.
Well, I thought I agreed with everything your attorney said, except the extent to which he has indicated that there would not be an intention to have an election until 2020, a ballot question until 2020, and that would push this off 2 years. That is not what I thought you were doing. I thought you were going to have a special election, again, I had been prepared to say, you know, we should just celebrate that you've had a great process, you've come up with a map, you've resolved to do this in 2020. I've been as accommodating and the plaintiff has been accommodating as possible in making this should be something we're all celebrating. But let's see where we go from here. You have a proposal. Your proposal is going to the county committee no matter what. Normally the county committee kind of tells you when it's going to be scheduled. If for any reason, Dr. Ortiz can also schedule it on his own or on the county committee's own. And if that doesn't happen fairly soon, not that we need to do this, but we could have a petition of 250 voters. So it will get on the county committee's agenda. And we've already spoken to Dr. Ortiz, and they're fine with the map. That's not going to be a problem. When they finish that, that's going to be an order of election. And I can predict that you will have a lot of people going to the county committee and saying, apply for the waiver. Because the Washington Unified did not do its job, and it will not be pleasant, because it will be talking about division. It will be talking about oppressing the voting rights of a minority. And that is something that I thought was inconceivable in this district. It will come down to an accusation that you are violating the California Voting Rights Act and the county committee has to do something about it. I don't think you want to go there. I really don't. I certainly don't want to go there. One way or the other, you are going to have district elections in 2020, just like you promised to do. If we have to go to court, we will go to court. It makes me very unhappy because I have grown to really admire this district and its values, and this is not its values. Being the first district in the state of California to try to not go through the legislature, you know, I've given you this extension. The legislature has reacted by saying that no attorney can grant extensions anymore until January 2020. If you file for the first time then, you're going to go in 2020. That's what the legislature, their response to how generous I've been in granting extensions. So please don't do this. Do the right thing. Do the efficient thing. It's costly, futile, and divisive.
Okay, Carlos Alcala. Okay, no. Mr. Alcala has spoken. Laura Jameson.
Oh, no, that's M5.
Oh, Sorry,
Grabbed it.
I was given, okay. All right. So at this, any comments from the board? Okay, so we will move now.
Yeah, I got
Because there's
I'm
comments.
sorry, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
comments.
Go ahead.
I've got a couple comments. I mean, I've said this before in terms of what I think we should do, and I think we should wait until our full board is impaneled. We have 4 votes here. What happens if we deadlock? I mean, that's the question. You don't have a direct answer. You don't have a absolute answer. So what is that? What happens with that?
Is that a legal question?
That might be a legal question.
Legal question for me then. So the answer to that is essentially, obviously, a 2-2 vote doesn't pass the resolution. The motion would fail for lack of affirmative vote.
Okay.
Could it be brought back?
It would depend on when, I think, and how. And I know I don't believe the board has adopted, I don't think we've adopted Robert's rules specifically. Generally speaking, if we're talking about reconsideration at the same meeting, it would have to be for somebody from the majority to bring back that reconsideration.
We haven't adopted
So,
Robert's
so,
rules.
so, Mr. Tunick, let me ask you, so if this was not to pass tonight, immediately, that would allow that would give Mr. Rafferty recourse to file against the district?
Well.
He has that.
Well, what's happening, if we do a waiver, it's not going to cost us anything. But if we don't do the waiver, it will cost us something.
I'm trying to figure which part of that I can answer.
If we get a waiver, we don't.
There was, obviously what Mr. Rafferty and the plaintiffs do is outside of my control, but.
Client.
So be clear that it's whatever the plaintiff decides, whether or not they want to proceed with the filing, because he represents the plaintiffs, and the plaintiffs, whether or not they want to proceed and pay his legal fees to go to court. And also be clear, they could actually do it today because we're outside the 145-day rule,
right.
as what Mr. Rapp. So today they could file it even if we voted on it because we're outside the 145. Just to be 145, they could file because we're outside the 145 days.
Well, I guess if you
it's
were
because
to.
what he keeps on saying.
If you were to, and not to get too far into the district's liability in open session, but.
Sorry.
That's fine, I'll answer the
We're
question
just
anyway.
going off of what he said.
We're just going off what Ms. Rafferty has presented.
If the waiver was adopted, that puts the district in a very strong position, and that is essentially the last step that the board can take. There's nothing really else for the board to do at this point, other than to let the county committee and the state board take whatever action they're going to take. So I think from a judge's perspective, it'd be very hard to see what a plaintiff would be asking the court to do, and as far as the board at that point. Absent, until that, until that waiver is adopted, there's still something, I think, arguably for the board to do. And at least I think that would be the plaintiff's argument.
But I mean, to be clear, it is the plaintiff's decision as to whether or not they want to proceed and whether or not they trust the board, whether they really trust the good faith efforts, and whether or not to then go the district. Then, if they do proceed, then we're possibly paying those additional legal fees because the plaintiffs have decided that they want to file against us. But I think I'm going to go back to Trustee Pizzotti's original kind of question of what happens when you deadlock, when there is when a fifth person comes back, and if there's a possibility of a reconsideration.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm not sure that you've got any specific bylaws. I don't think the education code specifically prevents it. And I was taking a look, I don't see anything in your bylaws that would prevent it. I would also say that, to be frank, when you have a reorganization meeting, the board reorganizes at the beginning of each year, essentially, and sort of starts a new session in a sense. The answer is I don't think there's a clear delineation saying you couldn't bring it back. It probably would ultimately be back to I think the board president really sets the agenda for the board meetings with the superintendent, and that would probably be where the decision would have to be made.
Yeah, and clearly we will be here in that new organization. Plus, right now we're missing one. And so the new board member then actually, because they're part of that, I could see kind of your understanding of that. That new board member also has, now a new governance role and would own the steps afterwards. So I could see, I understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my question. I mean, I understand, where the plaintiffs are coming from in this, and where they feel like they want to have more of a voice, or they feel like that their voice isn't being heard enough in terms of their representation on the board. But, I mean, if you look at this board, I think that's not exactly accurate. But my concern is, I've said from the very beginning, this should be done in 2022, after the census. We're going to be drawing lines for 2 years based on 2010 census data. That has always been my principled argument in this. And if you would have said, let's do this from the very beginning, if you would have brought this lawsuit, Mr. Rafferty, in this year and said, hey, let's do it in 2022, I would have supported that. In fact, I tried to get an amendment when Trustee Alcala brought it forward. I tried to get her to amend her proposal to do it in 2022. That has always been my principal position in this. It makes no sense to draw lines twice. That has always been my position. So I feel like, the threat of millions and millions of dollars for a lawsuit is not a real credible one, because it's you, Mr. Rafferty. You're the one who's going to be charging us millions and millions of dollars. Yeah, because we don't have control over how much you charge. So I don't like being threatened, and that's what I feel like we're being here. But you may have a better opportunity if there's a full panel of board members. That's what I'm saying, and that's what I'm suggesting.
I want to remind the board that we are not supposed to be directly addressing the public when they have made public comments.
I will address our lawyer and ask all questions to him. I have a few.
Thank you.
And I'm ready to vote on this tonight. I said I would last time, and I am. But because we've been talking about this for 2 years, and I've been saying the same thing for a long time, but not everybody has heard us in the public, I want to make sure that they understand where I'm coming from before I move forward with my vote. And so I think it's important because we have been accused of not caring about kids, we have been accused of not caring about minorities, and we have been accused of Jim Crow laws. And so I want to make some things very clear before I vote forward with this, because I take those things very personally, because this is a community I love, and this is a community that I love to serve. And this is a community that I am proud to serve in every single part of the community. So I have a couple questions. One, is Mr. Rafferty from West Sacramento?
Not as far as I'm aware.
Thank you. Does he live in West Sacramento?
I can't tell you, but I don't believe so.
Okay, thank you. And then my question would be, if somebody had been interested in district elections, could they have taken this to a vote for the public? Could they have circumvented the school district and put it on the ballot?
I think they would have had to go through the, as Mr. Rafferty referenced, actually go through the county committee process to get it on the ballot. But that would also have been an option, yes.
Okay, so somebody could have done that?
Yeah.
Okay. Since the plaintiff decided not to do that and instead to bring it to us, do you have an estimate of about how much money maybe that we have spent as a school district?
I think I'd defer to staff on that, but I'm not sure. I think.
Wow.
Okay, so about $110,000, not including staff time. We have had more meetings than needed by law because we wanted to be as transparent, as open, as public as possible with the public, so we have done that. We have really, I want to apologize to staff because I feel that we've drained our staff time to do this. So I just want to make it very clear that there was a way to do this for the plaintiff without coming to the school district and costing us the staff time and money. Thank
Yes,
you. Okay. So now that that is clear, I want to make the case too, since it's come up, that that we are looking at not caring about parts of our city or other comments that have been made to us. And so I just want to address that as well. That there is not, and it's all easy to find information, it's all posted on YOLO website, is there is not a person that has won their neighborhood precinct and not won a seat on this board. Everybody on this board has won, come in first or second in every single neighborhood in this community. And I am very proud to represent our community. And I was at the home the other day of a family in Bright, and they said, I want you to represent me. I know how to pick up the phone and call you, and you're always here. And I'm very, very concerned about some of the people who've run and not won. I did not vote for them, even though they live in my neighborhood, because I don't want them to represent me. So I just want to make it clear that that there has not been anyone that has won their neighborhood and not won a seat on this board. I think that's an important point to make, because we've been accused of keeping people out. I also want to make the point of the sacrifice of running. Of course, I think many of us on this board, I know I'll speak for myself, have taken, have decided to step back in my own career, taken a big pay cut, stepped back from those places, and I know others have too. So you make a sacrifice in your career because this is a place that you love and you care about. And it is a lot to help people and to see how much it is to run on this board. And simply moving a line is not enough. We need to really cultivate our community. We really need to engage our community and talk to them about what it is to be a board member and help people to run. And so I just want to urge all of our community here tonight and everywhere in our city to, and applaud those who ran. I want to applaud those who ran for school board, because we really need to build people up. And simply moving a line around is not going to be enough to have a strong board, because we want to have a strong board that cares about every single child. And so that is very important to me. I've spent a lot of time going to CSBA workshops. Over the last 2 years, I think I've read every single article on CVRA there is pertaining to California and what we're doing, and I've talked to a lot of board members. And so I want to bring up some things so that everybody understands some of the things that I am worried about, even though I am moving forward with my vote tonight. And there are things that were even brought up, not just at the California School Board Association meeting, but also that were brought up at our equity meeting. So I'm very honored, along with Vice President Wong, to represent Washington Unified on our California School Board Association Equity Network. And it is a really powerful group of people. It's invitation only, and there's hard conversations about equity and what it means to people. And these are folks, and racism, absolutely. And these are folks who absolutely care about uplifting their communities, everyone. And I will tell you that the conversations in that room were, a lawsuit putting us at CVRA has really hurt our district because we can't get anyone to run. The plaintiff had said in an open forum, well, if you can't get anyone to run, it's okay, because then you don't have to spend any money on an election and the board can just appoint someone. Well, that goes against the whole point of a democracy if we're appointing people that live in the wrong neighborhood of where you want. It doesn't even make sense philosophically. So there's a lot of negativity in terms of maybe not as many people run, people feel shut out. And so that's why we need to work really hard to make sure that we are cultivating people moving forward with this. And I am dedicated to do that, and to helping our community and to helping people run. And the other piece of that I want to say that I really want to applaud West Sacramento is that there have been some races with a lot of money poured into them, And the people who've spent the most money in West Sacramento have not won. They haven't won. And so that was the biggest concern, is if you run for West Sacramento, that's way too much money. And I just want to be clear, and I want to applaud our community, because this is a community on the school board. I'm talking about school board side, not getting into anybody else's politics. But this is a community for the school board that I am, where money is not enough. They want to vote for people that represent them and who are in their communities and who are talking to them. So I needed to make all of that very clear because I did not appreciate any of the statements that were made about our character. And so that is where I am feeling. I am moving forward because there's no case law to show that there's no case law on our side if we say no moving forward and we put this forward to an election. And it's our fiduciary responsibility. We've spent $110,000, and that just makes me sick. It could have gone on a ballot. So don't blame us up here for not caring about kids, because it could have gone on a ballot. And if the community wanted it, we could have worked. It could have gone on a ballot. It didn't have to happen this way. Right. So I am voting yes. I will vote yes to move forward when the time comes, when my colleagues call for it, but I want you to know my hesitation and my worry, and it is a yes vote with a dedication to help uplift people to run for office who are in precincts or areas that are not currently represented.
Thank you.
Appreciate that, and a lot of the sentiments. I may or may not be where you're at in terms of your vote. As a clearly person of color, as the first Southeast Asian woman who sits on this board, this lawsuit came at a time when we had 2 people from the North, 2 Latinas, and your first Southeast Asian woman. I also resent the fact that we're doing this because we were sued when there was an opportunity to actually save money. Voter suppression is about suppression of protected classes, and I had to kind of name that for me. I am really proud of this community. They elected their first African American this session, who did not have a lot of money. And just be clear about protected classes of who represents your school board, who your voters are voting for on this school board. Right? So that, for me, it's about democracy. On Tuesday, when I was getting calls from people who are working on the Georgia Stacey Abrams campaign about voter suppression, closing all that, that's voter suppression. When I'm getting calls from people in California who are being checked for IDs because they don't look like certain people in California, that's voter suppression. Is it happening here on this school board? I haven't seen that. I have not seen that. I'm a refugee woman whose family sacrificed itself for democracy and the ability to vote. Giving the public that opportunity means a whole lot to me because a lot was sacrificed for me to be here, for me to be elected. And for me, it's a core value about democracy. We spend money on a lot of different things in this district that we don't talk about. And democracy is something is worth fighting for, is worth dying for, and to give the constituents that vote. I just want to be very clear where I sit in my lived experience with this skin color, with how I look, and this experience on this board. And I've always said I've been very transparent with the fact that I do support single-member districts. I want to do it the right way and support democracy for the very reasons my family came here.
Any other comments? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with both my colleagues that have spoken in what they said, and especially what you said, Jackie. I mean, we have an incredibly diverse board, Preston was the first African American elected to this board, and that's going to be outstanding in the city. He was here earlier. Okay, and I just wanted to say to you, Mr. Tunick, to see the plaintiffs rolling their eyes while Trustee Wong was speaking is really kind of showing me really what this is really about. This is really about them trying to exempt a pound of flesh out of the city, not us. So I'm really disappointed. I'm really disappointed that it came down this way. And I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm too upset.
I will also be voting in favor of this because spending $110
$100,000 of our children's money has been a lot, and it could be a lot more. I know people want an election, that would be another 100,000. And if we don't go through this tonight and vote affirmatively to try and get this waiver, it's going to cost a lot more in these times that we're preparing for. In the years ahead, when we must be very, very cognizant of our fiscal responsibility to our district, to the children here, I cannot ever think that spending $1 million, which is very possible, other districts have done this. You know, that's our kids' money there. I keep thinking of our programs, of our bands. I keep thinking of our responsibilities that we have to pay into our teachers' salaries and everyone else here in this district. That would be irresponsible of me not to vote for this waiver. And I think it's really incumbent upon everyone to put the children first. This is going to be so critical. We are going to be facing some very hard economic times. And I agree with Sarah Kirby-Gonzalez. This is something that we need to do. That was our charge, to do what was right by the children first. So that being said.
Can I ask just one more?
Yes.
So just to be clear, it would only go to $1 million if the plaintiff decided to move forward and charge us those $1 million fees, unless DOK, is there something about your contract that we've changed? But I just want to be clear that up to $1 million is up to the plaintiff to decide to move forward with the lawsuit to pay legal fees. Well, not our, I know what ours would be, but up to that would be legal fees on the plaintiff's end.
It's, you know,
Have to
it's,
defend ours.
take a step back because it's kind of a complicated question. But the answer to that is that if there's a CVRA lawsuit, what the law says is that the plaintiffs can ask the court to award them their attorney's fees. Obviously, you're paying your attorney's fees as well. The amount of those really vary, but you know the short version is litigation is expensive. Litigation on the merits of the CVRA is extremely expensive. If that answers your question.
Yeah, so but the fees are determined by, we know what you cost us, but the $1 million mark is about the plaintiff's settlement agreements in other cases.
In other cases, I mean, and I don't mean to argue. In the other, it has been both because when we're talking about the $1 million marks, those are litigation over the merits of the case, in which case both sides have experts, but yes, probably the majority of those fees, or at least half of them, are the plaintiffs.
Just wanted publicly.
Mr. Trunick, I think it was mentioned that there were over 200 districts that have gone for this waiver, done the right thing by their districts, by the kids in their districts.
I think that's roughly the number that CD has, or excuse me, SB has looked at. I think it's in the high hundreds, if not around 200 right now.
All right. So at this point, I'm going to make a motion that we go with a waiver. May I get a second?
I make a second with a commitment to represent our entire community while on this board.
Thank you. We'll now go to a roll call vote. I vote aye. Sarah Kirby-Gonzalez?
Aye.
Kobe Pizzati?
Why don't you go on to the next person?
I have called Kobe Pizzati. I need to hear Kobe Pizzati.
We can sit here for a bit then.
Okay.
Abstain.
I'm sorry, what did you say?
Abstain.
You abstain? Jackie Wong?
No.
Votes are 2 in favor.
I move to put the measure on call.
For reconsideration.
No, put the measure on call. There is a difference.
We've already voted on this, so this is the roll call vote. It was Sarah Kirby-Gonzalez and I, yes.
I said move.
Jackie Wong, I'm not through. Jackie Wong, no. Kobe Pizzotti, an abstention. So, I move to put the measure on call. Hearing no second.
It's not a matter that you take up for motion and
Then what is it, Mr. Pizzotti? For a future board?
No, it's just place on call
All
until
right.
the end of this board meeting. You carry on with your business.
All right, so we will now move on to our P2 action approval of preschool instructional calendar, 2019-2020. Amber Lee, Assistant Superintendent, Educational Services.
Good evening, President Acala, Board of Trustees, Cabinet, and our guests. The California Department of Education adopted program requirements for all California state preschool programs to ensure that the instructional calendars are at least 175 days per year for our part-day programs, meaning half-day. To the extent possible, the California State Preschool Instructional Calendar is aligned to Washington Unified School District's instructional calendar for the 2018-19 school year. The preschool staff developed a calendar that best meets the instructional needs of our students while adhering to all state requirements. We respectfully request the approval of the preschool instructional calendar. I'm sorry, I misspoke. It's 2019-20 school year.
So moved.
I'm sorry.
I second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we will now move to,
There's nothing on board.
there was an M5 that I pulled. Right, and that was for action. We have a public comment, Laura Jameson.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what you pulled?
I'm sorry.
Do you want to talk a little bit about what you pulled?
Yes, actually, I pulled M5, and that was, sorry, Laura, go ahead and come on up. I'll just quickly reference it. I pulled M5, the approval of the contract services with Van Pelt Construction Services for the Bright Phase 2 project. At the request of calls that I actually got from the public and emails, they had questions, and that was one of the reasons that I did pull it. They had some concerns that this is a $9 million project. And, we currently have, I believe, the count was 75 children attending the Bright Culinary Academy, even with a proposed move. Some of the things we talked about in master plan, there were concerns that would only be 150 students, and that we currently have the capacity to accommodate them without any further moves made before we had community input on this. So this is one of the reasons I pulled the measure. Members of the public wanted to comment, and we, of course, want to hear what the public has to say. So that's why I did pull this M5. So Laura Jameson, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think in looking at the agenda item, it's on the construction management, and what my question was, what is the cost of the construction project going to be? Because that was not indicated. And if there's going to be conversations of facilities moving forward and what needs to happen, is this construction management contract and the construction of the Bright facility, is this really what we want to go forward with now? I mean, do we need to reevaluate the long-term plan? Is this cost worth it? Does it need to be done to accommodate the middle college students? Or are we going to stay with the Bright campus? I don't know if these conversations have been had. So those are my questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, could you clarify for me, because I did have some questions also. I didn't understand whether this meant, this was going to start immediately, or whether this was going to be considered after the master plan. It was on consent calendar, but we, of course, moved it over, so.
Right. Just to refresh everybody's memories, I wasn't here, but the timeline was that the Bright project was actually approved in 2014 in 2 phases. The $300,000 that is up for your consideration tonight is a contract manager, so be managing the project. It is part of the $7.5 million allocated for Bright Phase 2 that's already encumbered. Is it possible for the board to put on halt the Bright Phase 2 project? It is possible. However, this is not something that was just started. This has been in the planning and works, and the hundreds of thousands of dollars that have already gone into the planning is what the board would then be giving up. if we don't have a direction to go with it. Currently, that would also mean that the proposals that were put forward this evening also wouldn't be possible, because the
Under the master
current,
plan, you're saying, I'm sorry.
the current Bright facility has, I believe, and Andy, I'll look for how many fingers, I think it's 3 classrooms that have currently been modernized, because of the rest of the classroom space that was modernized was actually turned into food labs for the CTE program. So all the other classrooms that need to be brought online are part of the Bright Phase 2 modernization. There are no additional instructional spaces open on that campus. So is it possible? Yes, but the project was started in 2014, and the actual classroom spaces are to be brought online by Bright Phase 2.
Okay, so next year, how many students would that be? And then I'm going to let Board Member Zadi ask his question.
This year, all I can go is by this year's, and then try to give you some guesses, and maybe Andy would like to help. But the current middle college high school, in my recollection of looking at their last numbers, was 78. They did double in size this year, and are still recruiting pretty actively. They're looking to be at 280 in the next 3 to 4 years. And then the CTE program's total enrollment, Dr. Parsons? I'm sorry? 200. So that would be 275 currently, and it's going to be, if they continue to expand, it would be more next year.
Okay, so for this school year coming around 2019, you're looking at 200 being in the school?
It would be
right there?
275 if current enrollment stays the same for both of those programs, and it would actually, I think it'll go up based on the enrollment trend there.
Right now, we have 75 in there, so you're saying
In the middle
that would-
college, and then 200 in the CTE
and they would be
program.
moved over.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else have questions? Mr. Pizzotti, did you have any?
I'd just make a motion.
A second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
And I will also vote aye on this. All right. We will now, Mr. Pizzotti asked us to
Lift the call.
lift the call, right?
I'd like to change my vote from abstain to aye.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Pizzotti. So we have the 3, we have the waiver. We will now go to board governance. No items under this agenda at this point. Board and superintendent comments. We will begin with Sarah Kirby-Gonzalez.
Thank you. Okay, I want to talk about, well, first, since this was a heavy discussion and a heavy vote just now, I'll just acknowledge it, acknowledge the room, and just a continuance of the commitment to serving all kids. And I know that everyone on this board will continue to serve all kids in all areas. When somebody who is running said to me, "Oh, districts will be so much easier. I can just walk in my neighborhood and I won't have to get to know everyone." And I thought, oh no, we want to know our whole community. We want to know every school site. We want to know what they all face. We don't want to only advocate for our next door school. And so I understand the importance of having somebody that lives close by that you see on a regular basis and talk to them. I get that. But I just want to make sure that we continue to know all schools and all kids as we move forward. And it weighs heavy on me knowing too that this vote means that our new trustee-elect will not have a seat to run for in 2 years. And that is a big, that's a burden to have to make this vote and to know that there's ramifications with that. And it's not something that I wanted to have coming from me. So with that, I will move into the principal cafes that I know go on all over, and as a working parent, I can't get to all of them. I know not all of us can with what times they are, but I'm so thankful for the ones I can get to. And I really appreciated hearing at Bridgeway Island, Principal Chin talk about equity and MTSS and the same conversations that we have in this boardroom. And I'm glad that those conversations are happening at our school sites with staffs and then with our family. So it feels like it's getting full circle. There's more work to do. You can't just have a coffee conversation, but I'm so glad that those things are happening. I'm really thankful for that. I'm thankful, as I brought up earlier, for the time on the CSBA Equity Network. We did have a meeting. I am one of the few Caucasian women in the room, and I sure appreciate that because I get to meet with people from all different perspectives, and everyone really. It's a raw conversation that we have, and they are hard conversations and so important, such important conversations. And I'm really, really thankful for that room of board members who are so committed to making sure that we don't have families or kids that don't feel like they have a voice. And it is a privilege to be in that room. And so I'm looking forward to bringing back and the work that happens and bringing back more here and sharing what that group ultimately comes up with and does. I want to thank Bright for the Fall Festival, and it's always really special to get to see the animals and the kids. I think the chickens at Bright, I've said this before, they're hand-fed. They're the best chickens. So, they get the best treatment of anywhere. And it's great to see things that we have. We had kids come to us to ask for that program for future farmers, and it's so neat to see kids advocating for themselves and then get to see it in action and to see it working well. And so it's really special. I'm thankful for that. And of course, the culinary program as well, and everything going on over there. I want to bring up also, as I go through these pieces, it was hard to wake up this morning to news again of a shooting, and this time it wasn't at a school. This time it wasn't at a church. This time it was where kids were all out, dancing, having a good time at college night. My husband grew up in Thousand Oaks. That's where he was when I was dating him, and I had a lot of trips down there, including to that very bar. And just to know that there are families in our area. I dropped my daughter off at preschool, and the preschool teacher opened the door crying because her son had a full ride to Pepperdine, and he's okay. But just knowing that we have families all over right here too that are sending their kids away to college, and they shouldn't have to be worried, and kids shouldn't have to walk in anywhere and be worried. And where it always hits me the most is. And my husband knows the SWAT team that went right into, it's very personal, and it's always personal. It really is. And as I'm standing there teaching my fifth graders, and I look out the window, because when I drove up, the flag was all the way up, and, our custodian didn't get the news, and I watched them lower the flag, and I can only see the flag from my classroom when it's at half staff. And it happens all the time now. And so I know that it is hard to be teaching kids and just seeing that flag at half staff. And now we have our fires, and we have members of our community who are affected by those. Their families, their loved ones are affected by those. And so I just want to send a lot of love and support out to our community. And as we think about this, looking at what we can do on our part, having, and even an anonymous link on our website of see something, say something, and just looking out. We've done so much in this district with our social workers and outreach, and I'm so proud of the work that's happening here. But I want us to just continue to keep a pulse on how we can help be a solution to these problems that are happening all across our world. And I want to thank everybody who ran for office and put themselves out there. And it's a hard thing to do. And I'm really thankful for them for having those conversations. And I've already reached out and asked to sit down and hear from them and what their ideas are. And I hope that we can capture these folks and find ways that they can really still feel connected, because we have some wonderful leaders and community members in this city, and we don't want to lose them, just because they might not have a seat here. So how we can connect and reach out and make sure that that we're cultivating everyone in our community. And I want to thank you to the voters. It's such an honor. It is such a privilege to serve this community, and I'm very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you. Trustee Pizzotti?
Trustee Kirby Gonzalez really kind of put it eloquently about the shooting that just happened last night and how it really impacts all of us that see, young adults cut down in the primes of their life for no other reason than this senseless act. And we're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it everywhere. And how do you come to grips with that? I mean, we've normalized this, and it's just so terrifying to think that my 6-year-old could potentially be gunned down. I mean, there's so many school shootings, there's so many active shooter events that happen throughout this country. When did this happen to us? We've lost sense of community. We lost sense of who we are as what is right and not to harm another. Anyway, I know I can't put things into words quite as well as Sarah did, but I agree. It's breaking my heart seeing all this happen. I too want to congratulate our new member, Preston Jackson. He did very well in reaching out to all the communities, not just one district. He reached out to everywhere and was able to tally enough support, even on a shoestring budget, but he was able to do that. And I think that's testament, I think that's testament of what hard work actually gets you. So I would really like to congratulate him, Trustee Alcala and Kirby Gonzalez as well for your wins. That's just really, I think, a sign of, who we are as a community. We have a very diverse population in this community, and we have a very diverse board. So, and it's kind of, nobody looks like the other person here. That's one thing we can say.
I thought we were twins here,
Hey, nobody looks like me. So, I just think that that's something we should all celebrate. And I'm a little worried about what's going to happen next. I spend more time, except for when I'm actually picking my daughter up and dropping her off, I spend more time on other campuses than I do on hers. Is that going to change? Is it going to stay the same? I'm worried about what's going to hold next for our future of our community. Are we going to be all divided? Are we going to be divisive? Are we going to have just our own interest at heart? Is it going to change the nature of who we are? Is it going to change the nature of our community? Those are some things that I really think we're going to have to start thinking about. And we're going to have to start addressing. And then on a lighter note, I went to lunch today at the Bright Garden Cafe, and it was outstanding. The tri-tip sandwich was phenomenal, as well as the baked beans. And I got to have great conversation with the students who did an outstanding job of serving me my lunch. And I was just, I'm always amazed by those guys. They do a great job. So anyway, that's all I have.
Thank you. Jackie Wong?
I move to extend past 10 o'clock.
Amen.
But unless if nobody wants to.
Okay, all in favor?
We won't have comments.
Aye.
I can talk for 30 seconds.
Okay, so, all in favor? Aye?
Yes.
Okay, aye. All right, go ahead.
Okay, are we extending?
Yes, we are, and you're next.
It's a heavy night, and I think the CSBA Equity Network has me really rooted in who I am here. I must say that we have very intense conversations as electeds, and we're responsible to it. And we leave this room, and at least we leave this room, as one board, and this is what we support. So I appreciate my colleagues allowing me to speak my truth, right, as who I am and where I sit. And I stand by this board as a whole, no matter where we all discuss, how we discuss things. I think it's a heavy day between everything that's been happening from Tuesday till today. But I also want to acknowledge that the lives of some of our staff who have been touched by the Paradise fires and everything like that. So I want to acknowledge that some of them aren't here tonight, and my hearts and thoughts are because that is kind of hitting home a lot for me too, as well as kind of with the shootings. So I appreciate that. But yeah, appreciate the dialogue and appreciate that we can have honest conversations from where we sit. So. And leave as a unified board. That's it.
That's great. So I will be very quick. I want to thank the the West Sacramento Project Church for coming over and helping us at our schools, paint in those lines and the wonderful work that they've been doing. I attended the Cupcake Wars. It was a lot of fun over at the Bright Culinary Academy. I got to sample about 6 or 7. I should have called Jacoby. You would have enjoyed it. Yeah, I know. It was really great, and students were very creative. I also attended the Bright FFA. I think I missed you just by a few minutes, Sarah. They had a great spaghetti dinner that night. My husband and I went, and the service is always fantastic. I didn't win the prize this year. Last year, I bought raffle tickets and I won, but unfortunately, I didn't bring any cash with me, so I didn't enter this time. And I would also like to thank everyone for giving me the opportunity, along with Sarah Kirby-Gonzalez, to serve you again another 4 years. And I want to thank all the people who did run for the many political offices here in West Sacramento. We know that you do it with, a desire to be a public servant and to make our communities better. And with that, I want to say thank you, and Superintendent Linda Luna.
Wait, can I apologize?
Oh, I'm sorry. No, Jackie wants to say something.
Oh, no, just, again, I apologize for not congratulating all of those who ran, because it does take bravery and courage, and because you put your lives out there. And it is not easy. It is not easy. And so I've been really public on Facebook with this, that everybody had a different perspective, and there was so much richness that was brought to the table by everybody who put their name in the hat. So I appreciate that dialogue. I apologize for not acknowledging that earlier.
That's fine, thank you. So now we go to Superintendent Luna. I didn't forget.
Thank you, President. I'll call in Board of Trustees. I think with the time frame after 10 o'clock this evening, I think I'll pass on my comments. Thank you very much.
Okay, very good, thank you. So future board agenda items, S1 budget study session, December 5th, 2018. And we have, S2, student progress on California dashboard for 2018, discussed December 13th of 2018. And S3, the annual board organizational meeting, which will be December 13th, 2018. This time, we move to T, which is adjournment. May I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I second.
Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Adjourned.